I'm Raul, and I'm here with the Catch Wrestling Alliance, and we keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for joining me, no matter where you are, whether you're watching us on Twitch or YouTube or listening to our podcast. Thank you very much, and feel free to, especially if you're watching live, feel free to add any questions or comments into the chat box or whatever. I should be able to see them. I'll go ahead and pull the chat up right now. So just in case anybody um, wants to send a question or whatever, just go ahead and send it. I'll be here and I should be able to see it. All right. So first things first. So next week starts the class, or actually the two classes that I'll be teaching at UCLA. So that's going to be at the John Wooden Center here in Los Angeles on UCLA campus. So I will be teaching both catch wrestling and Chinese kickboxing, which is called Sanda, so Sanda. So Chinese kickboxing is actually what really got me into catch wrestling because Chinese kickboxing not only does it have striking, obviously, because kickboxing, but it has a lot of takedowns. So it's a really good transitional style, or a good style, like a good base style where you can uh, punch, kick, and stuff, and then throw down, right? So um, that would be like I think it's one of the best things that got me into like catch wrestling because like I was like when I was at UCLA as a student, we always had these different martial art classes, and then um, like I would try the jujitsu, and then all of a sudden, like it just didn't like work out so well, or at least I did really well, and without like really trying, like or at least doing their stuff, and so um let me see. Hold, there's a problem with the video. Okay, here we go. Okay, so sorry, I got kind of sidetracked. The video seemed to go out at least on my end. Okay, so I think it's back. So hopefully you can see. But basically, just with the Sanda and like the Chinese wrestling background that I had, I was able to do really well in the jiu-jitsu classes that we had at UCLA. So that's what made me want to research like what else is out there in the world of grappling, because like I wasn't necessarily so interested in that like freestyle and folk style stuff because yeah, no submissions. So I wanted something that had submissions, and that's when I eventually found catch wrestling. So anyway, starting next Monday, I will be back at UCLA teaching Sanda like I used to teach, and now catch wrestling as well. So I'll be teaching two classes there. I believe anybody can join the gym, so yeah, I'm not sure all those logistics or whatever, but because it is a public university, the public can join the gym. It's not just for students or even like the professors and stuff. Basically, anybody who registers or signs up for their passes can join the grappling or take all the grappling classes, which is pretty cool. I think they have like a grappling pass and then like a kick or like a striking pass, so you can take boxing and on the various styles of kickboxing and the Sanda class. So it seems like a pretty cool deal. This is definitely new from when I was teaching, because you just have to register per class. But I think now they're making it where I think also you can make sure you get a good workout, because like say if I think especially for students, like if you have a test or something, and you're unable to make your like Monday class, but since you have the grappling pass, then you can take another grappling class maybe later on that evening or whatever. So it's pretty cool, even though it might not be like a catch wrestling. Like if you miss your catch wrestling class, you won't be able to take it until the next time it's offered. But at least you might be able to do one of the many other styles that they have there. I think they have like even judo and of course Brazilian jiu-jitsu and whatnot. So I'm sure there's probably even more styles that they have. So yeah, that's why they put them all like as a bundle. So it seems pretty cool. Seems pretty cool. So anyway, let's go ahead and get to the topic. So this kind of came up during the week since I've seen you last. And this is why I encourage everyone to like put in your questions and comments, because yeah, it actually sparks conversation, and then also we get to talk about it here on the live stream. So what happened since I'd seen you last was the question came up about like like since various organizations are using the words catch wrestling, or at least the title catch wrestling, but if they in their events they have just a wide variety of rules. So at what point is it not catch wrestling anymore, or is it just all catch wrestling, right? So this is the thing. So I think so let me go and give you a little bit of my background, because that also comes up. I just want to make sure that you guys know that I'm not just like making stuff up, or I'm not just talking randomly or whatever. I have over 10 years experience in catch wrestling. I trained at Wigan, the real home of catch wrestling. I've trained with several of the like Billy Riley's wrestlers, so Billy Riley trained wrestlers. So that means like if you're kind of new to catch wrestling, I think because of a lot of marketing and stuff, you might have heard of Carl Gotch or Billy Robinson. Um, so their teacher is a man named Billy Riley. So I've trained with several of Billy Riley's students. So not just Billy Robinson or whatever, several people. So and then also I am there's the American lineage. So it came from the catch wrestling came from England and then came through to the United States, and so then the lineage holder in the United States is John Strickland. So I'm also like certified through John Strickland as well. He and I've known each other for a long time. He's come out to do trainings and stuff here in Los Angeles. Several times now, along with Roy Woods, who's actually the successor of Billy Riley. So I've had him here in Los Angeles, and I've also went to England. Um, you know, so anyway, I have a lot of experience. So this is actually like an educated opinion that you're getting. So it's not just some random person. Some not just some, like this is what you see a lot of times. You see a lot of people who come from a jujitsu background or like a no-gi perspective, and then they have plenty of opinions about catch wrestling, but they don't really know much about it, right? So that's not what you're getting here, right? So even though I've done jujitsu and I still do jujitsu, right? I still train in no-gi. So like I think this is probably one of the most educated opinions you're gonna get. But okay, so going back to our topic is so one of the things that came up was the whole idea that so say like if you have a catch wrestling tournament and then um, like then they allow you to be on your back like for a longer amount of time, or if you have someone in guard, which someone might term like body scissors or something like that. They might not say guard, they might say something else. It's more catch wrestling like, but you're not getting pinned if you're attempting these like submissions, or if you have someone in guard. uh and you add points. So again, traditionally catch wrestling didn't have points, uh and catch wrestling has pins. But so if you're seeing, and then last week one of you guys asked like, what about wearing gi? Is it still catch wrestling? So if you're seeing some things that um are like are also the kind of make taking away a lot of, say, like allowing guard, it just means that you're not wrestling anymore, right? Um, because you're not doing pins, right? So you have to be past the guard to get a pin. But then how can that becomes like less and less clear, because maybe you're in half guard and you pin somebody, but it's still guard, right? So anyway, they start going down a slippery slope, and it goes further and further away from the essence of catch wrestling. And so there's actually a term that Frank Gotch, like a real Gotch, right? The American catch wrestling champion, Frank Gotch called it the code of catch wrestling. And so I think I was first exposed to this type of thinking, like the code of like how catch wrestling is done by a lot of the old timers that I met, right? So the wrestlers who were trained by Billy Riley, or um, even I had a chance to speak with Billy Wicks, the before he passed away. That is the kind of the American lineage holder before John Strickland took over at American Hook Wrestling. So these are the types of things that so like the old timers, they were all kind of like in unison in their way of thinking. And but it's only like this kind of like this generation or whatever, at least people nowadays who are trying to promote it, who try to mold it to like what they think might be popular, right? Or what might make it seem more attractive to like say like someone who does jujitsu or something like that. So um, so that's kind of we can leave that like there. And then the other thing I want to bring in is like the evolution of catch wrestling, because so again, so like catch wrestling had its origin, right? And it was much more rudimentary. So it's more for like they'd even allowed kicks. It never allowed strikes. Um, but then you could also even like say if someone shot in to try to do like a double leg, you can still do things like guillotine. But a lot of times you would want to still try to throw them down and get that pin. So it's still much more pin oriented. And then later in the 1800s, it had kind of a reformation. So chokes were definitely barred, and also the kicks, like strikes, were never allowed, but like with your hands. But um, it had a little bit of a evolution there, and then but it still kind of had almost like it reached its final form, kind of like this idea where it was at its pinnacle, and it was done a certain way, and that became what Frank Gotch called the code of catch wrestling. And he said that when he was talking about having won a grappling tournament before he met Farmer Burns, his main coach. And so he says that to win by choking someone is not like something you should be proud of. And it wasn't until he finally started training with Farmer Burns that he learned the code of catch wrestling, right? So that's a pretty famous quote uh, from Frank Gotch about like what kind of catch wrestling is. But another thing that Frank Gotch stated, or at least he wrote in his wrestling book, was that even at that time, catch wrestling being much more like aggressive than I believe, even much more aggressive than what we see today in no-gi. Um, Frank felt that in his day, right? So this is like the before 1918. So the book was published in 1918, but he died about that same year. Um, but he felt that in super ancient time, or like ancient Greece or whatever, he felt like a long time ago, the wrestlers were much more aggressive, right? So he felt that catch wrestling was a little bit more tame. But imagine if he came today and saw what was happening in IBJJF or something like that, he would probably like be rolling in his crypt, right? So, but that's the thing. So in a way, it's like you see that like all these changes that happen over time go further and further away from even that pinnacle of catch wrestling. So that that time when the code of catch wrestling was developed and kind of like finalized, um, that like all the different changes that came from after that point, uh, like we see what happened in freestyle: no submissions, point game, speed game, very short time limits, whereas there was no time limits. Same thing with folk style. um, so but you see something like, say, along the lines of like no-gi jiu-jitsu, where that's its own thing in a way, but a lot of people are thinking like, oh, we're super tough, and not to say that you're not excellent athletes or you're withstand a lot of like pain, especially like in nogi. There's a lot of emphasis in leg locks nowadays. So a lot of people are withstanding like ankle sprains and stuff in matches, so to see if they can't come back and win, still beat the person. So, not to say that there isn't some toughness there, but it's definitely not as aggressive, or at least the pain compliance and all the stuff that is in like traditional catch wrestling. It's not there in no-gi jiu-jitsu still to this day, no matter how like tough they think they are or whatever. Because that's the other claims that that come across our social media, or that I've seen over time, that like, so a lot of times what it is like at in your time, and you might be thinking like, oh, what we have right now is the most advanced or the most evolved, but that's not always the case, right? So I usually talk about like, or I think one of the better examples is like freestyle and folk style wrestling, where you'll get people saying like, oh, this is wrestling, or this is the way the ancient Greeks and Romans did it, but that isn't the case. And freestyle and folk style came from catch wrestling, and freestyle used to be called amateur catch as catch can, and the term freestyle came from the Roman languages, their way of saying catch wrestling, which is like freestyle. It literally just translates directly to freestyle. So whether you say it in French or Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, it still translates to freestyle. So that the long name amateur catches catch can was shortened to freestyle. And so I think that's what people have to realize. Like, if you're not looking at the history, then yeah, you just accept like, oh, sure, you can be on your back like in a catch wrestling match, and it's still catch wrestling. Oh, sure, you can wear a gi and it's catch wrestling, or you can uh if you hold someone in your guard and you're not pinned, even though you're flat on your back. So that's kind of the some of the points that you have to be looking at, right? And in order for you not to be tricked, right? Because there's still people who are like our motto, keep real wrestling alive. That came from Billy Robinson, because this was a letter that he wrote to our friend Osamu Matsunami, who runs Riley's Gym Kyoto, so in Japan, um, because he had spent many years training with Billy, being his right hand man in Japan, and also training with Roy Wood and other Riley wrestlers in Wigan. And so they allowed him to have that name of Riley's Gym. So that's what they used to call their gym when they were training with Billy Riley. And that was the thing that, or in a letter to Osamu Matsunami, that's what he wrote: keep real wrestling alive. Because there is that, like I said, there is the code, right? There is the way that things were done, and it's actually still really excellent. So people off. This is the other thing that people say is like, oh, well, everything evolves and whatnot, but you have to see that oftentimes many things evolve to be a certain way, and then um, um, like then they can kind of devolve, right? So in the case of freestyle, folk style, even pro wrestling, right? It is so far away from the root, but it's not better than the original version. Um, so I think that's another point that you have to take into consideration, and you have to remember that so it's not necessarily like evolution isn't always for the better, right? So, and in the case of catch wrestling, there's really no way that you can say that it's like with freestyle, or you can't say like freestyle is better than catch wrestling. There's no submissions, point game, points, short time limits, all that stuff. So that's I rest my case, Your Honor. Just but that's like, these are many things that you have to take into consideration as to like like we even talk about like what is like different types of food and stuff, where people try to say like, oh, it's all grappling or whatever, but yet say for food, we have different types of cuisines, and so then you're not going to call Mexican food Chinese food, even though they might both use beans or some chili peppers or something like that. It's still something different. But in the case of catch wrestling, as the styles that evolved from it were more of like a de-evolution in a way, even though they're fun to watch. And like, I watched a lot of freestyle that that just happened over the summertime. And you've seen the videos that we do, the breakdowns of a lot of the freestyle techniques that occurred at the Olympics this past summer. So it's fun. It's cool to see, and it's there's a lot that um, still from catch wrestling, right? But it's not cognizant of this submission holds and whatnot. So um, that's why you'll see a lot of people, or you'll see like what Flow Wrestling, they put out their video basically proving that um, like grappling is better than amateur wrestling, but they call it wrestling, right? So um, that that is the other problem, and I think we talked about it last week, where I showed you clips from Uma Fight Camp uh, where that Uma Fight Camp was discussing the differences between catch wrestling and amateur wrestling, and he felt that catch wrestling, because of its its wrestling ability and its understanding of submission holds, that's what gives it an edge in a fight over jiu-jitsu. So that's as we talked about last week. But it's really great that you see someone who knows that or understands that, because I think nowadays, like I've seen people say like, well, these other things that are using the term catch wrestling, at least it means there's more catch wrestling out there and better than nothing. But it's almost uh like like it's like these analogies there. It's like, it's like calling Brazilian jiu-jitsu catch wrestling, or where they're wearing a gi and they're on their backs, and so there's characteristics that you want to be looking for when you're looking at catch wrestling. That was the other thing. Like, I think it's about 10 years ago now that a really cool video was made. It's a very short documentary about Roy Wood, and where he just discusses catch wrestling, and how he states that he's just trying to keep to the ways of how he was taught. And one of the statements that he makes is, he says, a lot of the things that I'm seeing nowadays. So this was even 10 years ago. So he says, so I'm sure he's seeing all these videos and whatnot, people who do tons of holds and whatnot, and claiming that they're doing catch wrestling. But to someone who is an absolute expert in catch wrestling, Roy said, like, there's a lot of things going around or being shown nowadays, and they're calling it catch wrestling. These things I would never have considered to be catch wrestling. So um, that's again coming from an absolute expert. So your buddy who just learned catch wrestling from some YouTube video, and he's not an expert, right? So, but this is the actual lineage holder from the epic, legendary coach Billy Riley, right? So that is an expert, and that's the thing. I think in the news nowadays, because talking about the pandemic and all that, so people are or the idea of like who an expert is actually, I'm seeing it a lot in the news and commentary and stuff like that. Again, so for catch wrestling, an expert would be someone like Roy Wood, right? That would be an actual expert, the person who like legendary coach Billy Riley, who won all these amazing grappling or wrestling tournaments. And you should totally read the book about him that was put out by Wigan. It has a lot of great details, not only about him, but a lot of the more notable wrestlers that he trained. Really amazing. A lot of great photographs, a lot of great evidence that you can see. Not only his like philosophy, but you can see like the stuff that they did. So that book is called Billy Riley, the man, the legend. I believe it's like, or the legend, the man, or whatever. But funny side note, in that book, I'm in that book, right? So I get mentioned in that book too. So there, right? No, but at least that also shows that at least my point of view is more of an expert opinion than just your buddy on the street, or just some, especially like a person who doesn't do catch wrestling and maybe only does like no gi or whatever, and then um, and then they think like, oh, it's all the same. It's like, no, there's an actual style to it, and like I mentioned earlier, there's an actual code of catch wrestling that exists, right? So even though it had like this evolution and almost like it reached its peak, and so then that peak is when um, like the code was solidified, right? So you might have some historians. I know there's one historian that says like, well, even like it like that peak is not real catch wrestling because of the more primordial version was different. But you have to say like you have to think like in with regards to evolution again, like say humans are kind of like actually human let's keep it simple, right? So you start with something more rudimentary and then it gets to like the great point, and it can continue, but and like my point is that after the solidification, then you had a little bit of degeneration, and then now is when we're trying to like keep real wrestling alive because so many other styles um unfortunately um like got so much more famous, right? So um, you know, people, pro wrestling is still really popular. And like what happened after the Olympics is that the men's heavyweight who won gold, Gable Dean or Gable, right? the Dean Gable Dan. I don't know. Anyway, I just know that he's named after Dan Gable. I believe his first name is Gable, and I'm sorry for confusing the name because I'm just thinking Dan Gable. But anyway, he just signed with WWE, right? So again, great move on his part because I think he's just finishing college and like he's already got a contract. So I believe he even pulled out of competing in the World Championships in freestyle because like yeah, it was like he did all he needed to do, um, and then he got the contract. So, but again, it's not catch wrestling, right? Robot Jocks, Gable Stevenson. Great, thank you. I was totally forgetting the last name. There we go. Thank you. So Gable Stevenson. Thank you, Robot Jocks. Um, so you also Robot Jocks also asked me about other entities that are claiming to do catch wrestling. Um, Basically, I mean, that I think I'm kind of giving you guidelines as to how you can evaluate for yourself, right? So hopefully, you can see like based on what I've been telling you guys, so you can see for yourself does the school or the entity meet these criteria of what is considered to be the code of catch wrestling, right? Because our goal is to keep real wrestling alive. Since that is our goal, then we gotta just really keep pushing forward with the real message and um, not really involve ourselves with too much of the other people. But with that being said, um, I want to know like ultimately who wants to be competing. Some people have expressed interest in in participating in one of our events. So, just keep me posted about that. Like if anybody wants to compete, maybe we can try to set up some matches for you, and especially if you're in like the LA or Las Vegas area. Most likely LA is usually easier, but it's also kind of easy um, to have events in Las Vegas as well. And so, uh, just throwing that out there because I know that those are the other comments we get often. Where it's like, "Hey, I want to compete," and then this happens so many times, like where people say that, and then they say like, "Oh, well, you're in the West Coast, and I'm in the Midwest," and then so then we have like two major tournaments right in Iowa in the Midwest, and then they still don't show up. So if you're serious, go ahead and uh, reach out. You can comment or send a direct message to our Instagram and our uh, Facebook. So usually those I get notified about. So yeah, just let us know. Like if you're really serious, right? Uh, so Anyway, so hopefully that information kind of gives you guys a better understanding of like how to even evaluate for yourself this code of catch wrestling. So when you start going even further and further away, so like one thing, like say like striking, right? So punching with your fists and stuff like that, that was never part of catch wrestling, even in its more primordial version. So again, if you're seeing striking or people pinned and holding people in guard and stuff like that, then um, it's going further and further away, it's going further away from even folk style and freestyle, right? So that is very like those are indications for you, right? Whether it's like whether it is still catch wrestling, right? Or so it's like again, it's like how can I make this more clear? It's like say if you have cars, right? And one is one brand, and then you say you have a Toyota and a Ford, right? And then you can't just take the logo off and take the logo off the Toyota and put it on the Ford, and then say like, oh, this is a Toyota. It's like it's these there's these distinct differences, even though they both might be vehicles. Again, you wouldn't be able to call one thing they're not interchangeable. They're still different. So the way things are done, even in different factories and whatnot, are different, right? So I think those are my main points. Feel free to ask any questions. There are a few of you guys watching. So last time you guys are way more talkative, but um, so wrapped up in what I have to say, right? But comment because the other thing that I want to at least mention again would be Frank Gotch's statement about the code of catch wrestling, and he had before he met Farmer Burns, he won grappling tournament by a choke, right? And then he said after he started training with Farmer Burns, he realized that that's not like winning by choke is not an honorable way to win, and this was kind of like the way of thinking at that time, right? So he said it's not an honorable way to win, and then from Farmer Burns, he learned the code of catch wrestling. So that's more of my point, where it's like catch wrestling doesn't necessarily have to evolve to be more like no-gi, right? Catch wrestling in itself is excellent. So we say like at its pinnacle, right? It's actually very excellent. Um, but um, I think so few people really learn this code, right? That you're getting all kinds of things that happen, or all kinds of things, and people are calling it catch wrestling. And then, so just kind of to uh, recap, then we have an actual expert like Roy Wood in his documentary stating that a lot of things that he's seeing being that are called catch wrestling, he would never have considered them catch wrestling. And this is an actual expert whose coach Billy Riley, who coached all the famous, Wigan wrestlers, he handed the gym over to Coach Roy, and he stayed there actually. So after he retired, he would still go to the gym and watch Roy teach, and then they would still like talk about teaching strategies and whatnot. So um, that's like a real expert. That's a real. um, all right. Okay, so I want to just thank everybody. Actually, we do have um, a few people who joined on our membership. So on our YouTube channel, we have memberships available. So I just want to thank everyone who has become a member. So just so you know, you can join this channel on YouTube. It's you can just contribute. I'm trying to put even some more videos. So basically, what you get more access to more of our like behind the scenes videos, some of our content that like we did like a seminar in Humboldt, Iowa. So that's where Frank Gotch was raised, and so you get access to the seminar that we did where in the park where Frank trained, right? So And I'm trying to put up more and more. Actually, there's actually a lot of videos behind that paywall, so you can get more access. So if you join the channel, you get more access. You get access to those, and we have different tiers, so you get more and more access based on the tier. But either way, I really appreciate anybody who basically just watching. Thank you for just watching the videos, and but if you become a member, I appreciate that too, because it just helps our future endeavors. Um, all right. Oh, actually, you guys are commenting here. Um, all right, Wes Boso. Thank you for your work. Hope to train with you in person someday. Oh, that'd be great. So, um, I'm here in LA most of the time, especially since we're still restricted on traveling, right? So, I'm not going anywhere, and I'll be teaching at UCLA on starting Monday. Sword Tune. Uh, oh yeah, I guess that's not a question. But can anyone tell me the approximate timestamp to rewatch where he describes the code of catch wrestling? Uh, Robot Jocks, the whole thing. Great, great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not that long, right? We're only at what, minute 36, right? But yeah, hopefully, at least if you do watch it, then hopefully I've given enough examples to um, get you to understand that. So it's like there was almost like this pinnacle, and then we have even people who came later. So you can think like even Billy Riley was a little bit later, and then again also Farmer, I mean not Farmer, Billy Robinson and Roy Wood. Again, even later, but the kind of like the mindset is still the same. So this Roy Wood, and I would also include Billy Wicks. These old timers were not as old. Of course, they're not. They weren't. They weren't as old as like Frank Gotch and Burns. And Burns was born in the 1800s and whatnot. But you see the mentality and the way of doing things still was the same, right? So that code was, as it evolved and reached its pinnacle, then, or when it was finalized, then that still transferred through time, right? So transferred from, especially from Billy Riley and a lot of the wrestlers who were in the United States, because Billy Riley, this is a really cool story, right? Because there was a man from Finland, Vaino Kettonen. So he was in the United States and he trained in wrestling, right? And then he ended up in Wigan later, and he helped, uh, you know, Billy Riley to train, and so there was that connection between Finland and United States and Billy Riley. So because Billy Riley did come to wrestle in the United States as well. So there's a lot of this kind of back and forth with wrestling. But again, what I would say is that like these people or these groups of people still kind of had a similar mentality with regards to the code of catch wrestling, and that got passed down, to the later generations. So whether it it was in the United States or in England. So like I mentioned, Billy Wicks, who was in the United States. Also, I mentioned Dick Cardinal, who was in the United States. So they both stated that there's this way of doing things in wrestling that is very similar, if not exactly the same, as what you would hear. Even Billy Robinson stuff that he told me directly, or Roy Wood, also even Tommy Moore, right? Or no, not Tommy Moore, his son Michael Moore. And so Michael Moore, I have some of his brief clips of him on our channel, on our YouTube channel. You can look up Tommy Moore, and then also you'd see even after that. So we have Ian Bromley, kind of stating similar stuff. You can see he has like a similar mentality to what I'm trying to describe as being the code of catch wrestling, right? So, um, hopefully, I'm giving you enough evidence and enough kind of like an idea of what this kind of idea is, where it's like the code of catch wrestling, what it is, and the mentality of it, or the way things are done. and so that you can kind of decide for yourself like what is or what is not catch wrestling, or how far away from the code do you get then, and that still makes it catch wrestling, or is it just has something just crossed the line for you to make it not catch wrestling, right? So maybe we'll go ahead and leave it like that for today. Feel free to comment, and again, thanks to all the channel members. If you also want to learn catch wrestling, we have the CWA Academy through our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. That's kind of a graduated course where it's like, you're going to get access to a bunch of lessons at first, but then once you demonstrate proficiency in some of the foundational techniques or the fundamental techniques, then you get more access to more advanced lessons and so on. Right. So that's on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. Especially if you're not around LA, or if you're not around South Carolina with John Strickland, American Hook Wrestling. So yeah, I guess I've said enough, right? So again, if there's anything you guys want to talk about for next week's live stream, just let me know. Chances are, I mean, for the past couple of weeks, the conversation started from your guys' comments. So you just keep them coming, and so hopefully we can kind of give people a better idea of catch wrestling, the code of catch wrestling, and together we can help keep real wrestling alive. Thank you all.